The Council, an immense and powerful interstellar governing body, had always seemed distant, almost like a shadow hanging over humanity's place in the universe. But the message that suddenly arrived was nothing short of terrifying. Earth must be eradicated for the so-called galactic stability. The news spread across the globe within hours, carried by news networks, social media, and emergency broadcasts, and panic gripped millions. People froze in their homes, unable to fully comprehend the scale of the threat, while governments scrambled to respond, issuing statements of reassurance that often did little to calm the rising fear. Cities buzzed with anxious whispers, streets filled with people discussing evacuation plans, survival strategies, or simply wondering how they had come to the attention of beings so far beyond human technology. Amid this chaos, a quieter, less visible movement began to take shape. Scientists, engineers, strategists, and ordinary citizens, teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, and office workers started connecting through secure channels, forming networks to share knowledge, tools, and ideas. Even those who had never imagined themselves as leaders found ways to contribute. Makeshift labs were established, ideas for communication and defense were sketched out, and communities worked together to prepare for survival, not relying on strength alone, but on intelligence, innovation, and the careful coordination of countless small acts. People realized that humanity's greatest weapon was not advanced technology alone, but the unique ability to unite across borders, cultures, and professions in pursuit of a single goal: survival. As military and space agencies assessed the Council's capabilities, civilians devised strategies that leveraged human adaptability and creativity, thinking of ways to use what they had to offset what they lacked. Families and neighbors banded together, sharing resources, food, and shelter, and a quiet sense of determination began to replace the initial terror. Even in the face of unimaginable odds, people refused to succumb to despair. They understood that the Council saw them as fragile and easily controlled. But humanity's true strength lay in its unpredictability, its capacity to learn and adapt in real time, and its unwillingness to surrender quietly to a fate imposed from above. Across the planet, ordinary individuals became extraordinary in their contributions, combining careful planning with courage and resolve. Every secret meeting, every coded message, every improvised experiment and tactical simulation brought humanity closer to a collective understanding that survival was possible. But only if every person, no matter their background, chose to act. And so, even as the sky seemed emptier and the threat larger than ever, a quiet spark of hope flickered within human hearts. A recognition that unity, intelligence, and courage, human traits that could never be fully measured or controlled, might be the only thing standing between extinction and a future that still belonged to them. As the full weight of the Council's threat settled over the world, humanity began to respond in ways that were both quiet and extraordinary. Governments, realizing that traditional strategies alone would not be enough, reached across borders and formed secret alliances, sharing technology, intelligence, and resources that had previously been closely guarded. In parallel, ordinary people stepped into roles that required courage and quick thinking, roles that were never taught in schools or rehearsed in drills, yet became crucial in the face of extinction. Pilots volunteered for missions that pushed the limits of their skills. Engineers stayed awake for days on end, modifying equipment and finding ways to repurpose existing technology. And medics worked tirelessly to care for those who were injured or struggling under stress. Communities that once focused on their own survival now collaborated, forming networks that stretched across continents, exchanging knowledge, tools, and strategies that were never meant to meet in a single place, but now intertwined into a growing human effort. Even those who were not directly involved in science or defense found ways to contribute, whether by gathering supplies, sharing critical information, or simply encouraging others to keep moving forward. The Council, watching from its distant vantage point, assumed that fear alone would be enough to crush human determination, that a species so small and isolated on its blue planet would quickly crumble under the shadow of interstellar authority. But they had underestimated a fundamental trait of humanity: creativity. Time and again, humans found ways to turn ordinary resources into tools for survival, ordinary skills into unexpected advantages, and ordinary courage into feats that seemed impossible. As secret plans were tested in hidden locations, as simulations became reality in controlled strikes and defensive maneuvers, it became clear that the combined effort of countless individuals, each acting with intelligence, empathy, and bravery, was forming a force the Council had not anticipated. The air of desperation was replaced by an almost tangible determination, a quiet confidence that while the threat was immense, it could be met through ingenuity and collaboration. Even in moments of exhaustion, people found inspiration in small victories, a successful maneuver, a breakthrough in communication, a life saved, that reminded them that survival was not only possible, but achievable if every person played their part. Across cities and towns, the energy of human cooperation created a rhythm of resilience, a heartbeat of strategy and unity that pulsed through nations. The Council's arrogance blinded them to this collective force, to the idea that humanity's strength was not measured by raw power alone, but by its adaptability, its persistence, and its willingness to act together when faced with overwhelming danger. And as ordinary citizens became heroes in ways they never imagined, humanity began to understand that their only true advantage in this impossible challenge was themselves, their intelligence, their courage, their ability to unite against a common threat. And in that understanding, a new hope flickered, brighter and more powerful than fear, promising that even against the most formidable opponent, humans could rise and fight as one. When the Council's ships first appeared in Earth's orbit, the sheer scale and unfamiliar design of their fleet sent shivers through every command center and civilian hub. But humanity refused to shrink back in fear. The ships moved with precision and authority, scanning the planet as if deciding whether a simple flick of their power could erase all life below. Governments activated their space defense systems, but it quickly became clear that Earth's technology was inferior. Yet humans had something the Council could not predict: ingenuity and determination. Pilots who had trained for years on standard spacecraft now improvised daring maneuvers, weaving through the vast expanse of orbit with agility that larger ships could not match. Engineers had rigged satellites and drones to carry electromagnetic pulse bursts, disabling or confusing the advanced sensors of the Council's vessels. Teams of strategists coordinated in real time, sharing information across continents, guiding each strike and countermeasure with precision. What might have seemed like chaos to an observer was actually a carefully orchestrated dance, a display of humanity's ability to adapt quickly under pressure. Even in the quiet moments, small actions mattered. Technicians monitoring systems from hidden bunkers adjusted power flows, calculated trajectories, and predicted enemy responses, turning every challenge into a possible advantage. Civilians on the ground watched the sky anxiously, knowing that each success or failure would shape the future of their species. Yet they felt a strange pride in seeing their ingenuity reflected in the resistance above. The Council, observing these maneuvers, could not hide their surprise. They had assumed fear alone would paralyze humanity, that a species without comparable firepower would surrender without resistance. Instead, they were witnessing humans turning limitations into strengths, using intelligence, collaboration, and quick thinking to create unexpected outcomes. Small victories, like confusing a ship's targeting system or rerouting a communication link, built momentum, giving pilots and engineers confidence to take risks that previously would have seemed impossible. Every attack, every countermeasure, and every improvisation reinforced a growing truth. Survival was not determined by size or technological dominance, but by adaptability and teamwork. Even in moments when Council ships seemed unstoppable, humans found gaps, weak points, and overlooked opportunities, striking with patience and precision. Observers on Earth and in orbit began to see a pattern emerge. Intelligence, creativity, and unity could amplify limited resources into powerful outcomes. The Council had underestimated a species capable of learning rapidly, cooperating across distances, and turning fear into fuel for action. As the first encounter reached its climax, Earth's defenders had not only survived, but had proven something vital. that humanity's greatest weapon was not a single advanced weapon or fleet, but the combined ingenuity and courage of ordinary people acting together in extraordinary ways. By the time the Council withdrew for the moment to reassess, they were confronted with an undeniable fact: humanity could fight back, and the path to survival was paved with intelligence, adaptation, and collaboration that no force could easily extinguish. As the first encounter with the Council's ships settled into memory, human scientists and engineers gathered in secret facilities around the world, their minds racing to devise a plan that could turn the odds in their favor. They studied every detail of the Council's ships, their sensors, their weapons, and their communications, looking for patterns and weaknesses that might be exploited. With limited resources, they had to be creative, repurposing everyday items and existing technology into tools that could be used strategically in ways the Council would never anticipate. Satellites, once designed for weather monitoring or global communications, were adjusted to form a network capable of tracking enemy movement and transmitting coordinated signals across continents. Drones meant for research or delivery were retrofitted with sensors and communication devices, turning them into agile messengers and reconnaissance tools that humans could control with precision. Engineers modified power grids to create localized electromagnetic bursts that could temporarily disable advanced systems on enemy vessels, while software specialists hacked together programs that could mimic Council commands and sow confusion in their network. Even ordinary objects like cargo containers, shipping cranes, and industrial machinery were turned into components of makeshift defense systems, demonstrating that human ingenuity could transform the simplest items into vital instruments of survival. Teams of strategists coordinated these innovations, sharing real-time updates and adjusting plans as the situation evolved, ensuring that every action, no matter how small, contributed to a larger unified effort. Ordinary people became part of this effort as well, operating communication hubs, monitoring satellites, or simply observing patterns and reporting anomalies that could help refine the plan. The energy in these hidden centers was electric, a mix of determination, tension, and quiet hope, as each breakthrough reminded humans that they were not powerless, that cleverness and collaboration could overcome even the most intimidating threats. Meanwhile, the Council, watching from afar, remained unaware of the full extent of human innovation. They expected standard defensive maneuvers, conventional attacks, and predictable responses. But the repurposed technology and improvisation created a system so fluid, so adaptive, that their calculations were thrown off at every turn. Humanity's ability to improvise, to think quickly and collectively, became its strongest weapon, proving that intelligence and creativity could rival raw power. Each successful test of the system, whether a drone reaching an unexpected location or a satellite network accurately coordinating defenses, reinforced the belief that survival was within reach. People began to understand that courage alone was not enough. It was the combination of ingenuity, coordination, and bold, calculated risks that created real strength. By transforming ordinary items into extraordinary tools and connecting them through a web of human creativity and collaboration, humanity had taken the first true step toward survival, showing that when faced with an overwhelmingly powerful enemy, the mind and spirit of people working together could achieve what brute force alone could never accomplish. The decisive moment came when humans, long underestimated by the Council, seized an opportunity born from the enemy's overconfidence. The Council believed their superior technology and experience would easily crush any resistance, but they had not accounted for humanity's ability to adapt, observe, and improvise under pressure. On the battlefield of space, ordinary people performing extraordinary tasks became the key to survival. Teams of engineers and strategists worked quietly, decoding encrypted signals from the Council's ships, understanding patterns in their attacks that had previously seemed random, and finding subtle ways to reroute the movements of smaller vessels, turning the enemy's own strategies against them. Pilots carried out daring maneuvers, striking with precision at weak points, while fleets of drones, repurposed from civilian use, created distractions and false targets that confused the Council's automated targeting systems. Sabotage played a critical role as well. Technicians in hidden facilities redirected power from satellites to create sudden bursts that temporarily disabled communications or disrupted energy flow in critical systems, allowing human forces to act with moments of advantage that seemed almost miraculous. Each action on its own might have appeared insignificant, but together they formed a chain reaction of disruption, forcing the Council to adjust continuously, often too late to regain control. Ordinary people, scientists, pilots, volunteers, found themselves performing tasks they had never imagined, making decisions under pressure that directly impacted the course of the battle. Every success, no matter how small, bolstered confidence across Earth, spreading a wave of quiet courage that reached even those who were far from the front lines. The Council, watching from their distant command centers, began to realize that humanity was not only surviving, but actively countering every move they made, anticipating weaknesses, exploiting overconfidence, and responding faster than their calculations had predicted. Panic began to ripple among their ranks, something they were unaccustomed to experiencing, as they recognized that the humans they had intended to erase were now shaping the battle on their own terms. Earth's defenders, driven by determination, creativity, and an unwavering desire to survive, understood the value of unity in this moment. Small victories built momentum, each one proving that intelligence and collaboration could overcome raw power when applied with careful timing and observation. Across the planet, the people supporting the effort, those monitoring communications, tracking ships, providing resources, or guiding pilots, felt the first real taste of triumph, a sense that their combined actions were turning the tide of history. The turning point was not about a single dramatic strike or a weapon of immense power. It was about the sum of countless small, intelligent, and courageous decisions made by ordinary humans working together. In that moment, the lesson was clear. Survival depended on thinking faster than the enemy, acting strategically, and believing that every individual contribution mattered. The Council's arrogance had created an opening, and humanity had seized it, proving that determination, intelligence, and unity could challenge even the most overwhelming force in the galaxy. The Council watched in disbelief as humanity continued to repel their attacks, not once or twice, but repeatedly, and each victory seemed to grow bolder than the last. From their distant command centers, they could observe the careful coordination between Earth's defenders, the way ordinary citizens, whether scientists in labs, pilots in orbit, or technicians in hidden facilities, took risks that made a real difference in the unfolding battle. Small acts of courage, once dismissed as insignificant, began to accumulate into a force that challenged even the Council's most advanced strategies. A drone launched by a local community delayed the Council's surveillance for crucial hours, allowing engineers to redirect power from satellites to disable targeting systems. A pilot's quick thinking avoided disaster while creating an opening for a counterattack that would have seemed impossible a few days earlier. Medics and volunteers on the ground kept critical operations running by ensuring that those who were tired, injured, or stressed could continue contributing. Each action, born of human courage and ingenuity, struck at the assumptions the Council had made about the species they believed could be easily dominated. Leaders within the Council began to murmur among themselves, their confidence giving way to growing panic. They had assumed that threats alone would break the human spirit, that fear of overwhelming force would lead to surrender. They had miscalculated entirely. Humans were not only surviving, they were adapting, learning, and acting faster than the Council could anticipate. The Council's advanced systems and calculated moves were being outmaneuvered by a combination of intelligence, empathy, and willingness to take calculated risks, factors they had not accounted for in their initial plan. Panic began to ripple through the Council's ranks as they realized that humanity's strength was not in any single weapon, fleet, or technology, but in the collective creativity and determination of ordinary people acting together with focus and courage. The Council had encountered a species capable of seeing possibilities where none existed, of using limited resources in extraordinary ways, and of inspiring one another to act decisively even under immense pressure. The more humans succeeded in countering attacks, the more the Council recognized that brute force alone could not secure victory. From mission control rooms to observation decks on massive ships, the expressions of shock, disbelief, and even fear spread among the Council's leaders, and they could no longer ignore the growing evidence that humanity would not be erased as easily as they had assumed. For the first time, they understood that humans possessed a combination of intelligence, empathy, adaptability, and courage that could change the balance of power. Every calculation they had made, every assumption about human weakness, was now being challenged by real-time results, and the Council had no simple way to respond. In witnessing humanity's repeated resilience, the Council began to grasp a truth they had ignored. The people they had intended to destroy were far stronger, smarter and braver than anyone had predicted, and their determination to survive was becoming a force that even the most powerful interstellar authority could not easily overcome. As the battle with the Council continued, humanity began to reveal its full strength in ways that the invaders could never have imagined. Innovation and strategy became inseparable. Scientists, engineers, and strategists worked tirelessly, finding ways to combine knowledge with quick thinking to protect Earth. Communities around the world, often hidden from view, coordinated secretly, sharing information through secure channels that spanned continents. Small groups of people, once ordinary citizens, became essential links in a vast network, passing along intelligence about Council movements, testing improvised technologies, and supporting operations from afar. Even children contributed, sending messages, monitoring local sensors, and observing patterns that adults might have overlooked, their curiosity and attention to detail proving invaluable in unexpected ways. Farmers, too, played a role, repurposing machinery, rerouting energy, and providing supplies, showing that every skill, no matter how mundane it seemed, could be transformed into a tool for survival. Volunteers in towns and cities worked long hours to maintain communications, distribute critical resources, or transport equipment, their quiet efforts forming the backbone of a global plan. Each act, however small, was part of a much larger strategy, a chain of decisions and actions that built momentum, making the Council's calculations increasingly unreliable. The invaders had assumed that humans were limited by technology, population, and organization, but they had not accounted for the species' ability to improvise, adapt, and act collectively with intelligence and determination. Time and again, humans found ways to turn constraints into advantages, using ingenuity to create tools, devices, and methods that disrupted the Council's plans in subtle but meaningful ways. What looked like scattered individual efforts was, in fact, a synchronized system of collaboration where the actions of one person could amplify the impact of another thousands of miles away. The Council's attempts to anticipate human responses failed repeatedly because humans were unpredictable in the best sense, creative, empathetic, and willing to take risks when necessary. Pilots carried out daring maneuvers in orbit while engineers rerouted communications. Medics ensured key personnel could continue their work, and analysts tracked enemy patterns, each contributing to a larger tapestry of resistance. Even in moments of exhaustion, fear, or uncertainty, people continued to act, demonstrating that courage was not just a matter of training or experience, but a shared determination to protect life and each other. With every successful defense, humanity proved that its greatest strength lay not in a single weapon or fleet, but in the intelligence, adaptability, and unity of countless individuals working together toward a common goal. The Council, watching from above, could only begin to realize that they were facing a species that refused to be conquered, a species whose collective effort, resilience, and creativity made them more than a target. They were a force, growing stronger with every action, with every small victory, and with every human who refused to give in. Humanity had become a living example of strength, not measured in weapons alone, but in courage, collaboration, and the ability to turn even the smallest contribution into a part of an unstoppable movement that no external power could easily control. After facing repeated defeats and seeing their carefully planned attacks fail time and again, the Council grew desperate in ways they had never anticipated. Their fleets, once symbols of unstoppable power, now appeared uncertain and hesitant as their strategies faltered against a species they had underestimated. The realization that brute force alone could not achieve their goal forced the Council to make a decision they had never imagined. They had to communicate with humanity. Slowly, cautiously, they opened channels, sending envoys and emissaries to Earth, offering concessions and negotiating in ways that seemed almost like pleading. The messages were carefully worded, attempting to regain some sense of authority, but the tone betrayed their desperation. For the first time in history, humans were not only surviving against an interstellar authority, but were now in a position to control the conversation. Leaders, strategists, and ordinary citizens working within global networks carefully analyzed every word, every gesture, and every signal from the Council. Realizing that this was a moment of unprecedented opportunity, communities and governments coordinated to respond collectively, ensuring that humanity presented a unified front, one that would not be intimidated by threats or false promises. The Council, accustomed to obedience and compliance, found themselves navigating a negotiation in which the humans dictated the terms, showing patience, intelligence, and the ability to think strategically under pressure. Every concession offered by the Council was carefully weighed, and humans began to understand that power was not measured solely by fleets or weapons, but by knowledge, unity, and the courage to act decisively. Ordinary people continued to contribute in ways that mattered, monitoring communications, verifying the Council's claims, and ensuring that no misstep could weaken humanity's position. Even in moments of tension, the human negotiators remained calm and composed, reflecting a collective strength built over months of struggle, innovation, and cooperation. The Council's desperation became more apparent with each passing day, as they realized that they could not predict human actions or responses, that their own authority was fragile in the face of a species capable of adaptation and collaboration. This reversal of roles, where humans had gone from being targets to being decision-makers, sent waves of hope and confidence across the planet. People recognized that their resilience, intelligence, and unity had shifted the balance of power. They had turned fear into strategy, panic into planning, and courage into influence. The Council, watching from afar, could only attempt to keep up with humanity's new position, learning too late that the species they had sought to erase had transformed every act of survival into a demonstration of strength. In controlling the negotiation, humans proved that their greatest weapon was not just ingenuity or bravery alone, but the ability to act together, think clearly, and respond with wisdom, even under extraordinary pressure. Humanity was no longer simply defending itself. It had become a force that could define the terms of its own survival, showing that courage, intelligence, and unity could command respect from even the most powerful authority in the galaxy. After months of struggle, preparation, and countless small victories, humanity finally entered negotiations with the Council from a position of true strength, a place that had once seemed impossible. The people of Earth had demonstrated intelligence, adaptability, and courage in ways that no interstellar authority had expected, and now the balance of power had shifted. For the first time, humans were not pleading for survival. They were setting the terms. Negotiators from all corners of the world coordinated their responses, analyzing each word, each tone, and each gesture from the Council, ensuring that every interaction reinforced humanity's strength and unity. Communities contributed in unseen but essential ways, gathering intelligence, relaying updates, and maintaining systems that supported the negotiators' ability to act with confidence. The Council, which had once looked down upon humanity as weak and expendable, was forced to confront a reality they had ignored for far too long. Aggression alone would no longer determine the outcome. Human ingenuity had turned the planet into a network of coordinated defenses. Human adaptability had made every strategy unpredictable, and human courage had inspired ordinary citizens to perform acts that became critical to survival. As negotiations progressed, the Council slowly began to acknowledge that they could not command or intimidate humans in the ways they were accustomed to, and a sense of respect, cautious and reluctant at first, began to replace their arrogance. Every decision, every concession, and every carefully measured response from the humans reflected months of shared experience, problem-solving, and collective effort, showing that the species was far more than a simple target. They were a force that demanded recognition. The talks were delicate. Peace was fragile and required constant attention, but even in the tension, the message was clear. Humanity would no longer be coerced by threats, and their resilience and intelligence had earned them a place in the galaxy where respect, not fear, dictated interactions. Citizens around the world followed the developments closely, understanding that the outcome of these negotiations would define not only survival, but the way humanity would be regarded in the universe for generations to come. Every small action, from monitoring communications to supporting decision-makers on the ground, contributed to a process that proved the power of unity and the value of thinking collectively under pressure. Slowly, as the Council recognized humanity's achievements, a fragile peace began to take shape, one built on mutual understanding, respect, and acknowledgement of human strength rather than the threat of annihilation. It was a peace that could easily be broken, yet it also symbolized the first moment in history when humans had taken control of their destiny in the face of overwhelming power. From scientists to volunteers, pilots to engineers, every individual had played a role, and their combined efforts had forced the Council to see humanity not as a species to erase, but as a partner that could not be ignored. In this recognition, humans discovered a deeper truth. Courage, intelligence, and unity were far more valuable than any weapon or fleet, and when applied together, they could redefine the balance of power, creating a foundation for a future where respect, collaboration, and human resilience were the true forces shaping the universe. With the Council's recognition and the fragile peace established, Earth entered a new chapter in its history, one unlike anything humanity had experienced before. The planet was no longer seen as a fragile target to be destroyed at a moment's notice, but as a powerful and respected species in the galaxy, a presence that demanded acknowledgement for its intelligence, resilience, and courage. Across cities and remote communities alike, people felt a quiet pride, understanding that their collective effort had rewritten what was possible. Ordinary individuals, pilots, engineers, medics, volunteers, teachers, and even children had contributed in ways that were once unimaginable, proving that every small act could ripple outward, influencing events on a scale far larger than anyone could have predicted. Humanity had learned that survival and strength were not defined only by weapons, fleets, or technology, but by the unity, quick thinking, and bravery of individuals acting together with purpose and determination. Governments continued to work closely with citizens, creating networks of communication, defense, and collaboration that ensured the lessons of the crisis would never be forgotten. Scientists and strategists began to share knowledge freely, not only to improve defenses, but to foster innovation, creativity, and cooperation, reinforcing the idea that intelligence combined with unity could overcome even impossible odds. The Council, once a distant and intimidating force, had become a partner in dialogue and cooperation, seeking understanding, advice, and collaboration where before there had only been threats and orders. This shift in perspective was a tangible reminder that power could be earned not only through force, but through resilience, courage, and the capacity to act collectively in the face of danger. Across Earth, people rebuilt, restructured, and reimagined their role in the universe, aware that they had survived because they had learned to trust one another, to think creatively, and to act decisively when it mattered most. The youngest generations, witnessing the courage of their predecessors, were inspired to contribute, to imagine possibilities, and to understand that even small actions could shape the fate of the world. Humanity had discovered that the true measure of strength lay in its people, their ingenuity, empathy, and willingness to stand together even when the odds were stacked impossibly high. The Council, observing this transformation, adjusted its approach, recognizing that cooperation, respect, and dialogue could achieve far more than fear or domination ever could. What had once been a planet under threat had now become a beacon of potential, a living example of how a species could rise from vulnerability to power through unity and intelligence. As Earth moved forward into this new era, its citizens carried the lessons of survival deeply within them, understanding that courage, collaboration, and determination were far more valuable than any single weapon, strategy, or plan. Humanity had proven that ordinary people, when acting together with purpose and clarity, could redefine their destiny, confront seemingly invincible forces, and secure a future filled with respect, opportunity, and hope. The planet and its people had stepped into a future where their intelligence, empathy, and bravery were recognized across the stars, ensuring that Earth's place in the galaxy would never again be questioned, and that the story of their resilience would inspire generations to come.